Welcome to Rugby Borough Council's Licensing and Safety Committee this evening. I'm Councillor John Keeling, Vice Chair of the committee and chairing the meeting tonight. The meeting is being web streamed to the public through the Council's YouTube channel. During the meeting, if you wish to speak, please use the push to talk button on the microphone in front of you. This will allow the camera to pan in your general direction. Before we begin the formal agenda, I'm obliged to read out the following fire notice. There is no fire drill scheduled in the building this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, then please could I ask that you do make your way out of the building, down the main staircase and out of the main doors of the town hall and congregate at the entrance of Caldecott Park. An officer of the council will give instructions on when it is safe to return to the building. Moving on to the agenda, the first item of business is to approve the minutes of the meetings listed on the agenda, and that was on the 5th November 2024 and 15th of May 2025. And also said the licensing subcommittee meetings held on the 8th of April 2025, 4th of June 2025 and 24th of June 2025. Can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Dale Keeling. And can I have a seconder also, please? Thanks to you, Councillor Robert Barnett. The second item is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence, Democratic Services Officer?
Thank you, Chair. I have apologies from Councillors Garcia, Councillor Srivastava and Councillor Dumbleton.
Thank you. Third item is declarations of interest. To receive declarations of interest as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors, non-pecuniary interests, pecuniary interests, and notice under Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992, non-payment of community charge or council tax.
Chair, I'd just like to mention Coventry City Council is mentioned in the first report, and I work for Coventry City Council.
Thank you, Councillor Dale Keeling. So we go over to item 4 of the agenda. Can I get John McTurnan to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Rugby Borough Council is responsible for the licensing and regulation of the following Animal Welfare Act 2018 activities: animal boarding, commercial, so kennels and catteries, animal boarding, home boarding and daycare, hiring out of horses, breeding of dogs, the selling of animals as pets, training of animals for exhibition, dangerous wild animals, and operating a zoo. The current fees and charges for licensable activities were agreed by the Licensing and Safety Committee on the 22nd of January 2019, shortly after the introduction of the Animal Welfare Act was introduced. At the time, it was not entirely clear of the ramifications of the change in legislation. Therefore, officers were unable to accurately quantify the regulatory effort required to administer the regime. It is considered appropriate and necessary to recalculate the fees using up-to-date officer costs whilst having greater knowledge of the time and resources and implications required to continue delivering an effective service. The fee revision process considered the cost of administrating the animal licensing process, the cost of undertaking premises inspections, officer time, resources and software. The calculations were made with the support of the finance team, breaking down by section the officer cost of each activity covered, the initial application through to grant. Appendix C of the report highlights the current discrepancy between current fees and those of neighbouring authorities and other authorities further afield who carry out similar functions under the Animal Welfare Act. Allowing for the revised fees to be approved by Cabinet with immediate effect would ensure the service is able to continue to provide the licensing and regulation of said activities, whilst also recovering the increasing cost of administrative work involved. Members should note that only cost recovery is allowed under the Act, and therefore the service will not be making a profit as such should the fees be approved. Options available to members today: the grant of the proposal of the fees set out in the report, granting of the fees different to the proposal, or the refusal of the grant of the proposed fees set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions, please?
I'm quite new at this, so I would perhaps just appreciate a bit of clarity. When I looked at the hours that had been put aside for the officers, and then I looked at the proposed fee, there was quite a big gap. Unless my calculations are completely off. So it looked like there was about 3.5 hours time allocated to each application. Have I misread that or misunderstood that? On officer time. And then they gave the fees for the officers, sort of round about £48. And then the fee that was there was kind of 600. So I was trying to understand what that was, what was going on there. I may well have massively misunderstood.
No, if you just bear with me, the original appendix regarding the calculations was amended and resent out, but I'll just find that now for clarification. Regarding the officer cost, myself and Emma are main officers who deal with this, but we are on separate rates, so it was a middle value of the cost at the time.
I did get that there was a difference in that because I did see that. It was just that there did seem to be quite a big gap, and I didn't know if there was other costs that hadn't been included into that particular element.
So there are further costs involved. Obviously, we have a new system that's come into place, which should eventually, I mean, hopefully streamline the service and make it a better service and more transparent. However, you know, there are also other factors in terms of training costs as well. Myself and Emma were required under the Act to become qualified animal inspectors within a certain period after the Act was in place. You know, the cost of them courses was substantial at the time as well. So it factors into that as well. Also, you know, we are a developing team. We may have further officers joining the team who don't essentially have that qualification but would need it to carry out the function under the Act.
So are there actually, have you got any sort of figures that are allocated? Because I quite understand what you're saying. And obviously the costs that you've given are just, if you like, the raw cost of actually processing a bit of paper in front of you. And we all know it takes a lot more, but there was a kind of too much of a gap for me that wasn't being accounted for all of the rest, given the sort of framework that you're not supposed to make a profit. So it was kind of a transparency, what was going on. Can you explain it to me, please?
Sorry, just bear with me. I'm just loading it up now.
I can see at 3.11, you've got legislation allows Rugby to seek full cost recovery for work and effort spent administering the licensing process. So it's, I suppose, what is that, the package that goes with that?
Sorry, Councillor, was there a particular activity you were referring to in the calculations, or was it?
When I did, it was sort of, you know, very quick calculations last night. And I was going through and I was thinking, actually, the proposed fees are, you know, sort of 600, you know, on one of them, there's a couple of others, 700, some 200. And then when I looked at the hours allocated, it seemed like the hours came to about 1/3 of the costs, but as I said, you know, maybe I've misunderstood. So, which is quite possible. I'm pretty
I will say on this is at the moment the spreadsheet was supplied to us by finance to input our specific hours, and in relation to that, it came out of the cost of what it's currently costing us. So that reflects that in terms of the time. I mean, each activity is different. It can depend. Some, fall slightly under, some go over, but it's an average, I assume. But it was finance that set the calculations for us.
I'm not loud. Animal boarding 1 to 6. In the calculations, it's £206, which looks closer to what the current fee is at 210, but the proposed licence is 630. So does that work as an example of the gap that you're referring to? But the proposed licence fee, was that just for the 1 year, or was that? Because I can see the renewals are for longer, for 2 or 3. But is that actually, if that 630 covers 3 years, for example, then that does.
Yes, so
tallies up.
Your initial, how it works with the Licensing Act, if you applied initially, you would only be granted a initial year. Following on from that, you would be able then to, if good practice has been observed, apply for a 2 or a 3 year licence, which is why the fees go up in respect to that.
I think you're saying it's like a test period, isn't it? So that's why it's more expensive, because there's more, you do more checks during that first year to make sure they're okay. And then once you've got good tick for good behaviour, it then becomes cheaper.
I think that's fine. It's just that it isn't actually clear in the paperwork. So when I looked at this, I looked at that fee, and then I looked at the time you'd allocated, which was about 3.5 hours. And I sat there scratching my head because I couldn't see what was extra. So if you're doing more checks, or if you've got more work to do, you've got to go back, that really probably needed to be reflected in the paperwork because it's not clear.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Boo-Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. My queries for the licensing officer are addressed through you as Chair, and it's to do with 2 sections. There's table 3.2 and table 4.4, and in 4.4 it shows the proposed licence fee compared to the current, and there's very large increases in some of those. I wondered whether it's possible to say which of the processes that are referred to in table 3.2 caused the increase to occur.
Yes. So as I mentioned, sort of in the report, when the fees were initially set, it was a new act that came in 2018. So we, as a team, were not particularly aware of the amount of work that would be involved. So the fees were set considerably lower than probably what we should have been set them at. But without being able to, actually assess it, they were set at that price and have been. And as you can see from the other councils, local and a bit further afield, we would only be really requesting that they are brought in sort of in line with that. So that's why it may seem almost as a big jump. However, they've been, most application fees have been lower than they should have been for the last couple of years at least.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Amanda Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. My question was linked to Councillor Lewis's. I know it says in the report that we went out and asked for people to respond to the report, and I believe there wasn't anyone that came back with any thoughts, any sort of bodies. I don't know if I'm using the right word. I guess the question that I'm trying to get to is whether either anecdotally or formally we've heard back from businesses as to what their reaction might be to this, just to understand that side a little bit more.
So there's no requirement to actually to consult with businesses. However, myself and Emma over the years obviously have to carry out inspections, and it has been advised obviously that the fees will be, you know, increasing in line with obviously the cost and in reflection of the local councils. You know, it's understood. Unfortunately, everything is going up. So that, you know, it's been, I would say, well received, but there's no official requirement to consult with individuals or businesses in regards to this.
Any other questions? Councillor Siani?
Yeah, my concern is that when we don't consult, then we sometimes get the other side of it. So I think it's quite important that there should be an element of consultation, because otherwise, you know, there can be repercussions as well. So it's important, I think.
I mean, I can certainly ask the question, but in terms of a consultation, I'm not sure whether there's a mechanism in place to do so. In terms of the fees proposed, the options are obviously what I've already stated, and it's to go to cabinet. But I don't know whether there isn't a. It's slightly different to, say, taxi fees, in terms of we do have to consult with the trade and the trade representatives and the general public in regards to that. However, animal welfare fees it does appear to be, it's just set and it's decided through cabinet.
Any further questions? Okay. Move the report. Can I have a proposer?
I don't actually feel that my questions about what that gap is and what it was actually covering have actually been properly answered. I feel that there's gaps in the information we need to be able to sign off confidently and explain to the residents, you know, where the fees are coming from. And I think that probably is reflected in Councillor Norrie, and some of the questions Councillor Henderson and Councillor Lewis asked. So my personal feeling is that there probably needs to be a lot more clarity about where these fees are, because if you've got them at a certain level and then you put something in that's almost twice or three times the level, it will cause blowback. And I think that, you know, we need to be able to defend the you know, your department robustly as to why you need it. And there are, you know, wonderful reasons. You've said, you know, training is needed, you need to build up the capacity. There's a whole range of things that need to be accounted for, and I think it would be helpful to have that information.
I don't think how these things are written, but I would say some footnotes at least to explain, or something that will give that clarity, because I think, as Councillor has said, that it is important really to make sure if we haven't got the clarity, then other people will question that as well. So it's good to have a bit more clarification.
So Bill Lewis.
Thank you. What are the implications if this report isn't passed in this meeting this evening? And there are a lot of questions there, but so it seems to me some of them could have been asked in advance to give an opportunity for responses to be available before the meeting. Thank you.
So the implications are, as such, it's the service that we provide, but it is on cost recovery. So the money is needed to, you know, continue to providing the service under the Animal Welfare Act.
Can it be brought back at a meeting that could be held fairly soon?
Yeah, I mean, I would be quite happy to go back with finance and ask them to assist me in putting something, you know, that's more reasonable together for an easier understanding for yourselves and clarity on where the cost is coming from.
I would like really to say thank you very much, and we'd appreciate that. And I think it's probably just finance understanding how we need to have things really clear, particularly when there's a big gap. So thank you very much indeed for that offer.
I would agree.
Is there any further questions? Okay. So can I have a proposal to defer the item? Councillor Thompson, and can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Barnett, thank you. We all vote? That's passed, thank you. Let's go to item 5 on the agenda, the review of Statement and Licensing Policy 2026 to 2031.
Thank you, Chair. The report before you has been submitted to inform members of the committee of the need to review, consult and adopt a new statement of licensing policy. It seeks for the Licensing Committee's approval to commence a 12-week public consultation on the draft statement of licensing policy for the period 2026 to 2031. A copy of the proposed draft statement can be observed at Appendix A of the report. Under Section 5 of the Licensing Act 2003, licensing authorities are required to prepare and publish a statement of licensing policy at least every 5 years. The policy outlines how the authority will carry out its responsibilities in relation to the licensed premises and activities, ensuring that they align with the 4 licensing objectives. The 4 licensing objectives are as follows: the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. The draft document has been revised to reflect current practices, legislative changes, and local priorities. A policy of this nature must comply with statutory guidance and has been produced in conjunction with other Warwickshire authorities to ensure a more consistent approach. The proposed public consultation, should the committee approve it, would be used to gather views from stakeholders, including other responsible authorities, local businesses, residents and community groups. The feedback may be used in the final version of the policy, which will be presented to full council for formal adoption. This policy sets out how the authority intends to discharge its functions under the Act in relation to licensing activities, including the sale of alcohol, supply of alcohol, regulated entertainment and late night refreshment. The policy must and will be reviewed regularly throughout the 5-year period, with the licensing authority making revisions if considered necessary. The licensing policy plays a key role in ensuring that the licensed premises operate in a manner that promotes the 4 licensing objectives, along with providing guidance to licence applicants, responsible authorities, members of the public and the licensing subcommittee when determining licence applications, conditions and reviews. Subject to the committee's agreement, officers will launch a formal 12-week public consultation. This will include the following: publishing the draft policy on the council's website, circulating the document to statutory consultees as defined in the Licensing Act 2003, engaging directly with local businesses, residents, associations, town parish councils and partner agencies, including the police and health authorities, using social media and newsletters to encourage wider participation. Approval of the 12-week consultation will allow the council to meet its statutory obligation under the Licensing Act, while ensuring that the policy is informed by a broad range of local and professional views. The draft statement of licensing policy provides a clear framework for the decision-making and supports the effective regulation of the licensed premises within the borough. Thank you.
Any questions, please, for the officer? Thank you. Councillor Amanda Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. In the draft policy that we've got, are there any particular changes since the last one that it's worth sort of drawing out for us?
There is, and I thought you might ask that. I'll get them up for you. So there hasn't been a great deal of change. Obviously, the edits to the population figure and change to the dates. There's been a new paragraph on in terms of spiking on 8.9. There's reference to the Ask Angela scheme and Martin's Law as well.
Any other questions for the officer? Okay. Shall we take a vote on it? Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Dale Keeling. And can I have a seconder? Councillor Boo Lewis. Thank you. Can we take a vote? Motion carried. Thank you. And that is all of the items on this evening. Thank you, everyone, for attending.